Along with live bears, Lake Tanganyikan cichlids have become a favorite here in the fish tank barn. I really do enjoy their unique coloration and unique behaviors. So let's take a trip around the fish barn and take a look at all of my Lake Tanganyikan cichlids. Let's kick this tour off with some of my favorite Lake Tanganyikan cichlids, the Cyprichromis Leptosoma Blue Flash. I was able to find these fish at the Motor City Aquarium Club auction last November, and I was able to start out with a group of about 15 fish or so. These fish are currently living in a 55-gallon aquarium that they share with a couple of Xenotilapia bathyphyllus, which I also picked up last November, but at the OCA Extravaganza auction. As you can see in the video, the Cyprichromis are doing quite well and have colored up nicely. If you look closely enough, you'll probably find at least one holding female. I do have a small group of fry in here as well that were spit out about 2 to 3 weeks ago, and they seem to be doing quite well. And I have seen little predation from either the Cyprichromis or the Xenotilapia. This tank has really been fun to watch develop and is turning into one of my favorite tanks here in the fish barn. Since we're talking about Cyprichromis, let's talk about this group of Cyprichromis Leptosoma. I don't have the specific location for this group, but they're still quite nice. I was able to get this group last August from Jason at Primetime Aquatics at the Greenwater Aquarium Society swap event. Even though this is a smaller group, they're doing quite well in this 40-gallon breeder. You can see some smaller juveniles as well as a holding female. The Cyprichromis are the only fish that inhabit this tank, but you will find some hornwort that's out of the frame of this video. I really like using this plant in a lot of my Tanganyikan tanks since it's fast growing to help with nutrient export. Since it is a floating plant, it survives a lot better than most other plants with species like shell dwellers that tend to like to move the substrate around. All in all, I'm really happy with this tank and happy to see these fish spawning and starting to grow their colony. In the 40 breeder right next to it is my group of Neolamprologus Similis. I recently moved these fish from a 29-gallon tank that was upstairs in the barn. They were starting to get a little bit overcrowded. I had started off with an original group that I picked up from Jimmy at the Aquarium Co-op that shared a tank with some Neolamprologus Bouchardi. The Bouchardi eventually took over the 75-gallon tank that they were sharing. I had decided to rehome the Bouchardi and put the Similis into a smaller tank. At this point, I added some additional stock that I purchased from Sand City Cichlids. Needless to say, these fish did quite well in their new home and are now enjoying this 40-gallon breeder that they share with a couple of Cyprichromis Leptosoma utinta. This tank is quite entertaining to watch, especially when you watch the Similis interact with one another and rearrange their tank. So let's head over to one of the larger tanks in the fish tank barn, this 150-gallon. The silvery fish that you'll see in here are the Callichromis pleurospilus flame rainbow. This is a pretty neat looking sand-dwelling Lake Tanganyikan cichlid. In the wild, this fish can be found sifting through the sand and looking for microorganisms. But in the aquarium, this fish does eat prepared foods quite readily. While this fish does look silvery from a distance, close up, the males really have some beautiful sheens. Also sharing this tank are a couple of Cyprichromis Leptosoma yellowhead and conde, and also a single Lamprologus ornitopinus kigoma. I have been thinking about moving these fish to a 75-gallon tank, but I am still debating that move. Either way, I really do enjoy this tank and really do enjoy these fish. The 125-gallon tank that's next door is home to one of my two groups of Tropheus. These are the Tropheus Moliro Red Moori. I got these fish from my buddy Scott, whose fish room we toured last week. I've set this tank up with the Tropheus with some rockwork for some hiding places, as well as some jungle val for some line of sight blocks. The Tropheus don't seem to bother the jungle val, which has worked out quite well. I've not seen any breeding activity from these fish, but nevertheless, they're doing quite well. And these are actually some of the most colorful fish that I have here in the fish barn. So let's move on to the second group of Tropheus, these Tropheus Red Bemba that are living here in a 75-gallon. I got these fish at the Big Fish deal back in March of 2020, and they've done quite well for me. It did take them about a year or so to start breeding, but as you can see, there's now plenty of fry. A lot of people believe that you should only feed Tropheus vegetable matter, but I've not found that to be the case. I do feed these fish a wide variety of different foods, including the extreme krill and spirulina flakes, as well as the big fella pellets. I have been battling some algae issues in this tank due to the lack of plants but I will be planting some Vallisneria very soon. So let's briefly stop at this 75-gallon tank that's home to Cherokee the Frontosa. This fish has this tank all to himself since he really doesn't play nice with others. I was originally gifted this fish by Sergeant Tank, who had kept him for quite a few years. He just kind of hangs out behind his rock, eats and does his thing. He's definitely a beautiful fish. So let's head upstairs to this 29-gallon tank and the Telmatochromis species Temporalis shell. As its name implies, this fish is one of the shell-dwelling Lake Tanganyikan cichlids. I found these fish at the Grand Valley Aquarium Club auction earlier this spring. The males of this species will get about 2.5 inches long, with the females being about an inch smaller. The females will also turn a slate gray color, while the males will remain white. As with the shell dwellers we saw earlier, these fish are a lot of fun to sit and watch interact. Staying upstairs, let's take a look at this 40-gallon breeder that's home to two separate species. The first being the pair of Cyprichromis Leptosoma. These fish are much like their Cyprichromis cousins that we saw earlier in the video, but in my experience, seem to be a little bit more reclusive. The second is the Neolamprologus Similis shell. This is another fun shell dweller that's really fun to watch, rearrange their tank, and go in and out of the shells. I really do like the nice bluish coloration on this fish as well. I more than likely will be splitting this group up here in the near future. I really want to see if I can get some fry from the Neolamprologus. So I hope you enjoyed looking at all of my Lake Tanganyikan cichlids, which are honestly some of my favorite fish here in the fish barn. So with that being said, stay safe, stay fishy, and I'll catch you on the next video.